have the top of the hour, so we're going to get started. Welcome to our webinar today on the power of effective corrective and preventative actions. I'm super excited for a couple reasons. Number one, this is my favorite topic to talk about. Those of you that know me know that I love to talk about a good CAPA, but I'm also excited to have Meagan Jurick with me today. So Meagan is the product manager at CMX, and I just bet that some of you out there will go, CMX, I know that name. If you don't, they are our database provider, and we've been working with CMX for a couple of years now, getting a new database put together. So Meagan was very instrumental in helping us get that off the ground. So Meagan, welcome. Thank you for being here with me today. And I'm going to let you take it away. Introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you so much, Tammy. You were very instrumental, obviously, in getting everything set up on the platform. So it's kind of fun to be back here, I guess a year or so later, talking about corrective actions. But yeah, I've been with CMX, I think almost 9 years now, which is crazy. So yeah, I'm very excited to be here with you guys today. Thank you so much. I know everybody is so busy, schedules are jam-packed. So I really appreciate you taking some time to discuss a pretty important matter of corrective and preventative actions. So I'll go ahead and get started. And of course, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And yeah, I'm looking forward to an insightful conversation. So we can have kind of the best processes, the best plans, the best people in place. And I hope you do. And, you know, if you don't, we, towards the end, I'll talk about, you know, how our tools can potentially help with that. But even with all of those great processes in place, issues can come up in our day-to-day, problems occur. And so in our pursuit of eliminating those problems, we kind of have to expect that they're going to happen. And the way to kind of change the game and, you know, take a problem from being just a problem is to improve every time that a problem comes up. That's really what takes, you know, good organizations to being great organizations. It's kind of how you react to those unforeseen issues, how you fix them, and how you make it better for next time. So that's really what we're going to discuss today. I'll start off with some of the most common pitfalls that we see with CAPAs, and then we're going to kind of dive into like a risk-driven prioritization approach for how we fix those issues. So I'm going to start with some of the most common pitfalls. And if you see any of these and you're like, oh, I'm guilty of that, do not worry. Most of us are, and that's kind of why we're talking and having these conversations, again, just to get better. So the first is generic fixes. So something like retrained employee. Super common that something like this gets documented. That's kind of the equivalent if my computer isn't working and I turn it off and then turn it back on again. Where very generic. For some reason it works sometimes. Don't really know what the root cause of the issue was. It worked this time, it might not work next time. Not super helpful in the long run. So those generic fixes, they ultimately end up taking more time because you'll keep seeing the same issue over and over again because it's not fixed at the source. And that kind of leads into the next one of treating symptoms rather than the source. So kind of another good example is if I break my leg and I take some ibuprofen, it might help the pain, but until I actually get down to the root of my broken leg and kind of fixing what was broken, I'm going to keep having pain. And it's actually going to cause, again, more issues down the road. And that's kind of the key with what we'll be talking about is the less time that you spend up front really diagnosing an issue and thinking through kind of what the issue is. It might seem like you're saving time because you spend less time up front, but it really adds to the time that you're going to spend correcting this issue because it's going to just keep happening. So that, again, kind of goes into this next one of stopping at the correction. And we're going to kind of define correction versus corrective action and preventative action in just a second. But the correction is kind of fixing something that has already happened. So it's a reactive approach. instead of putting measures in place to ensure that that issue doesn't happen again and we don't have to correct it again. Next, we've got working in silos. So again, when a problem comes up, it might be tempting to just sweep it under the rug. Oh, let's fix it. We don't really want anyone else to know that maybe we messed up in this area, but again, doesn't really benefit anybody in the long run. Probably any issue that you will run into, someone on your team, someone on another team, someone at another site, it's very common that they have run into that same issue. So the more you're sharing your insights and your learnings, kind of the more you're creating a culture of excellence where it's encouraged, hey, let's talk about the things let's celebrate the things we got right, but then, let's go through our opportunities and learn together instead of just kind of staying in those silos and not sharing those learnings. Next, we've got incomplete or vague documentation. So this is kind of harmful for a couple of different reasons. One, let's say that I do go through and I identify the root cause of an issue, I correct it, but I don't document it. If I leave the organization in a couple of months, all of that knowledge goes with me. So not super helpful. It is very important to document kind of your findings and how you corrected things so that other people can share in those learnings. That's kind of the beauty of a digital platform, is seeing, clearly documented, here's how we fixed things. We'll get into this too a little bit more in a second as well, but when you're not documenting things, clearly and it's vague, it's pretty common that when you submit that corrective action and it goes through the review process, that it will get returned. So we'll go through that in a second, but again, it's just more time spent kind of on the process rather than, fixing what needs to be fixed and focusing on what's more important in the business. And then finally, so it's actually kind of common that CAPs can be pretty complex in how to fix them. And if you need a project manager to implement a corrective and preventative action plan, it's probably not going to take. So it's a fine balance of, you want your plan to be thoughtful, to be intentional, but you also want it to be simple so that it can actually be followed through on. So that's kind of the balance that we'll talk through. But I mentioned this just a second ago. Let's kind of take a second and look at the 3 different types of actions. So we've got our correction. And again, that is something, it's reactive. An issue has already occurred and we're fixing that issue that already occurred. So that's great. I mean, we do want to respond to something that we've already seen, but then we can take it a step further to corrective action. So again, something's already happened, we're being reactive, but we're eliminating the cause of the nonconformity that we've already seen. And it's very common that people will stop there. So it is good, but one step further is your preventative action. So this is where we go from, fighting fires and being reactive to preventing that issue or maybe similar issues from happening again or to other sites. So this one is, we're on the defense instead of, just reacting to things, or on offense instead of defense. So I'm going to do a kind of specific example where we talk through what it might look like if we, fell into the trap of some of those pitfalls and we're not documenting properly, kind of some of the damage that that can cause. And then we'll talk about, how's the right way to document corrective action plans. So I'm sure everybody can relate to this, but the example that we're going to talk through is noticing an employee not washing their hands when entering a food handling area. So let's say, I'm on site, I am, auditing, and I notice that Tammy walks in for her shift and she did not wash her hands. Super tempting for me to see that and go, wow, Tammy is she's having an off day. Maybe Tammy is lazy. I'm going to go talk to Tammy's manager, make sure that they know she didn't wash her hands. Cool, great. Corrective action is retrained employee, root cause is human error. Maybe that was the cause, but if we pause and we look at, Tammy's a great employee otherwise, I wonder why she didn't wash her hands today, kind of put ourselves in her shoes, we can uncover that there's a deeper issue. So, we come in the same route that Tammy came in, we see, okay, there is a hand washing station. So not sure why she skipped over it. It looks like there's soap, there's paper towels, there's a printed out procedure of how to wash your hands. I don't know why she didn't. Let's turn it on and see. And again, real world example, turn on that faucet and the water is scalding hot. Immediately, bring your hands back. That can cause real damage. Nobody wants to burn their skin off. So now we understand, okay, yeah, if I'm Tammy, I'm probably going to skip over washing my hands as well. I don't want to burn my fingertips off. So I skip over that. Maybe I put on hand sanitizer, not helpful for anybody, but it wasn't just that Tammy was lazy, Tammy didn't know the procedures. There's a real safety concern there. And so how do we address that rather than just Tammy didn't wash her hands? So instead of saying retrained employee, we can look and we can say, okay, the water station at station number 3 is scalding hot. So for correction, we've got to fix that issue that we've already seen. We're going to call the plumber to come in. He can come in by the end of the week. So by Friday, that's going to be fixed for this specific hand washing station. And then we do want to go talk to Tammy or, any employees and just remind the importance. Here's why we wash our hands. We don't want anybody to get sick. You wouldn't want other people, handling your food without washing their hands and getting you sick. There is a reason behind it. So that's great. That's the correction. We fixed what we already saw. So taking it a step further, there are 3 other hand washing stations. So for corrective action, we want to get to the root cause and maybe prevent it from happening at some of those other areas. So we can inspect those other hand washing stations, make sure that the water is good there. Maybe another one isn't. It's also scalding hot. So we can have that plumber come in and look at that station as well. So we've corrected that issue of the water being scalded hot, but then how do we prevent that from happening again? And that's really where the change kind of happens. So we can do something like implement a monthly monitoring program. Maybe we've got weekly checklists. Maybe we've got calibrated devices that alert us if the water is too hot. Better training for maintenance staff. Lots of different things that we can do, but then we can also look at what are some of the other areas that might prevent Tammy or anyone else from washing their hands in the future. Soap, is that something that we need to make sure that somebody is in charge of ordering that? And, there's just other things that you can do to kind of pull up from the very specific problem of Tammy didn't wash her hands today to how can I remove all barriers for all employees so that every single time people are washing their hands. And at that point, you have everybody bought in. They know that this is a culture of excellence. There's a reason behind it. We're not just asking you to wash your hands for the sake of washing your hands, but there's a reason behind it. Better training of everybody. And now you've got a great culture of everyone working together and you've fixed kind of the root cause of it. So kind of a couple more things around that, like practically as we get into addressing corrective actions, is when an issue comes in through the CMX system, there's a lot of evidence that's available as to why that issue occurred. So you're able to look at, here's the specific reason why. And then there's also embedded requirements for every corrective action plan. So you can see, here's exactly what was supposed to happen. Here's the evidence for why it didn't happen. And then there's also like regulatory internal requirements that you can review. So there's lots of different kind of data points that you can refer to as you're documenting your corrective action plan. And then as far as documentation goes, kind of the more detail that you provide, so who, what, where, when, how, that's going to speed up the review process for you. So again, we know as corrective actions are submitted that they're going through a review process. And if you just put in retrained employee, human error, probably going to get returned back to you. So the more documentation that you can provide, maybe you've got a copy of the work order of the plumber coming out. Maybe you've got a photo of the new temperature calibrated devices that are on each hand washing station, kind of more details that can help. It's going to speed up that review process. And Tammy, I know that there has kind of been a problem recently of like an alarming rate of corrective actions that are being returned. Is there anything you'd like to add kind of to that?
Yeah, I can share some details. Within the CMX system, we can see when corrective actions are returned, when they're rejected. We've had some calibration training with our auditors at the start of this year, focusing on things like corrective actions and when we accept those things that are not just corrections, and many of the pitfalls that Meagan, included on her previous slide. So I love those pitfalls. First of all, I loved your example of turning off the computer and turning it back on. That's a great correction. I wrote that down because I'm going to use that as an example in my training going forward, because that was a great example of what a correction is. But yeah, just making sure that you put all the details there and all the information, and don't just stop at that correction. But as Meagan said, go on and, complete everything. And that will just help that process more quickly. We do already have a question in the chat. Well, first of all, someone put a question down at 12 o'clock at the top of the hour. And I'm going to hold that question till the end. They wanted a little bit of insight into edition 10. So we're gonna hold that one to the end. That'll be the big finish. But we did have some questions in the chat already. So let's take a look. So we've got someone asking the question, where's the balance from doing a CAPA? I mean, basically, do we do a CAPA for everything? And I like the example you used here, Meagan, about washing your hands, because how many times do we see someone not wash their hands, not wearing a hairnet correctly, that we just look at it and go, oh, that was a minor thing. It was a one-off. And so we don't feel the need to go through that full process of root cause and corrective action. So where do we draw the line, and how do we differentiate between little versus big problems? I don't know if you have some thoughts on that, Meagan.
Yeah, it's a great question. Not every issue is created equal, and we all have busy days. And every time something comes up, if we stop and go through this whole approach, we're probably never going to get anything done. So there is kind of like a method of focusing on what poses the highest risk. So like food safety concerns, contamination, allergens, pathogens, regulatory violations, things that could get you shut down. That's kind of where you want to focus the most effort on. You do want to, take time on some of the other major and minor issues as well, though, but you just want to spend most of your time on kind of the food safety concerns and I guess the regulatory violations. I will say if you let small things slide, it's easier to slowly let big things slide. So I don't know that it's like a hard and fast rule of, if you see a hairnet not being worn once, it's okay. I would still address it, but just spend more of your valuable time on things that are going to pose a little bit more risk.
No, I think you
You-
said that, yeah, in a great way, because, we do want to put emphasis on the big things. But no, I like how you added those little things can become big things. And so, if I see one person not washing their hands, then, and I just let that go and chalk it up to she forgot, which we do have a comment in the chat about what if she just forgot. Well, I'll address that in a minute, but if we just let it go, okay, she forgot and we just let it go, then somebody else is going to see Tammy not wash her hands. And so then Meagan goes, well, I don't have to wash my hands. Tammy didn't wash hers. And so little problems grow into big problems. And so that's why we have minors, majors, and critical. So, those different levels, as Meagan said, focus on things that are really important, but don't forget about those little things, because they could become big things. Okay.
Yeah.
So we do have a question that kind of goes back to one of your pitfalls. Well, actually, it's on this slide here, that retrained employee, that corrective action, that one that we all hate to see. So somebody said, what else can you do besides retrain and re-emphasize the importance if she just forgot? So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Meagan.
Yeah, I know for myself personally, if I just hear like a standard, it's helpful. It is good to know requirements. You need to know them, but knowing the why behind it can kind of like I kind of mentioned creating a culture is really important because you're probably not going to be able to catch everything and you're probably not going to be able to retrain everyone. So if you bring everyone into the problem, at every level. So every employee in your organization, they can be responsible for creating that culture of excellence, of food safety, of quality. So explaining the why behind things, why we need to wash our hands. That one seems like such a simple one, but why we wear hairnets, why, we don't want jewelry on, why we're not, eating and drinking in areas where there's food. When they understand the why behind it, apart from just what this standard is, it brings them in of like, okay, I play a bigger part than just, another cog in the system. I'm, really helping protect people's safety. So that's one thing that I kind of like to focus on of apart from just retraining, kind of taking a step back and explaining the why and explaining why it matters and bringing everybody in. And then you don't necessarily have to correct the employee that doesn't wash their hands. If I don't see Tammy not washing her hands, her coworker might see it and know, okay, this is why it's important. So not everybody's kind of brought into the problem and everybody is a part of the solution. Instead of just like, oh, retraining every single time. It's everybody kind of knows what to look for, they know the why, they know the importance, and they're working together, I guess.
Yeah, and I would add that I hate to see the words retrain or the word retrain, and here's why. Because if that's your corrective action, then what you're telling me is you're going to do the exact same thing that you've already done, and you're going to expect different results. So I'm
Yeah.
going to give Tammy the exact same training that she's already had, and I'm going to expect her behavior to change. And someone mentioned behavior related CAPAs in our chat. And what I say about that is if your corrective action is training, then your root cause is poor or ineffective training. So you need to decide what you're going to do about that. So it may be a different training method. I mean, I know a lot of you, I know I was a practitioner. So we used a lot of training that was people sitting in a room, watching a PowerPoint presentation on a screen. And so they might have to answer a couple of questions throughout the training, but then you need to evaluate that training. Is that the best method? Is that the most effective method? And I will tell you, there have been times that, I've changed up training. So instead of using a PowerPoint presentation, maybe we go to live instructor. Maybe we strengthen the exam. Maybe we give follow-up exams, throughout the year to reinforce the training. So there's a lot of things that we can do to deal with behavior related, and then at the end of the day, I've had to have conversation with employees that said, life's all about choices. You can choose to follow the rules and work here, or you can choose to work somewhere else. It's real simple. I'm not going to say that you can correct everybody's behavior. But even our example with Tammy forgot to wash her hands. Tammy didn't forget. Tammy had to walk by the hand washing station to get out into the production area. Tammy didn't forget. There was a reason behind that. So yeah, you guys have got some great questions coming in. Someone's talking about corrections not having to be documented. Again, I'm going to hold that one to the end because we're going to get into just a sneak peek into edition 10. So someone has a question here about how do we do corrective action on something where maybe it's a foreign object that's not found in our facility. So let's say we do a root cause on something. What's our CAPA going to be then? If we can't really find the root cause, we haven't really talked about that, but what should we do then if we just can't find it?
That is a tricky one. Um, I don't know that I have any specific examples or thoughts on that? I imagine you do though, Tammy.
I'm just thinking that you have to do your due diligence.
Mm,
You know, you have to put forth the effort, have a great process like Meagan is explaining to you here. Have that process in place, follow your process, do that root cause analysis, and let it drive you where you go. And if you can't find it, then it's hard to do something to correct something you can't find. But you have to do your due diligence, right? So I'm going to let you get back to your presentation, and I'm going to keep monitoring these questions.
yes, they're so good. And it all kind of ties together. And there's not always like a singular answer to everything. It is a process. And you kind of said that, Tammy, of I guess going back to that of retrain employee, you're constantly calibrating what works and what doesn't work. So have processes, have plans in place, but be prepared that as life happens, you might have to calibrate it along the way and kind of adjust. So um, okay, so we kind of talked through like what those pitfalls are, what it looks like to document the correction versus the corrective action versus the preventative action. And this is great because it kind of goes into one of the questions of like, how do I know where to put my efforts? Because again, time is so valuable. I wish we had infinite time to be able to, focus on issues that come up, but how do we know where to focus that energy? So when your audit is completed and those issues come up and you see the corrective action, you'll notice that each one is tagged with a different risk. So you might see critical, major, minor nonconformances. So that right there kind of tells you where to focus your issue. Again, all of them do need to be addressed, but those critical ones, so like food safety hazards, regulatory concerns, like the primary, we don't want to get shut down. We don't want loss of business. We don't want anyone getting sick, anyone getting hurt. That's where you focus the majority of your efforts. You don't necessarily want to treat all corrective action plans with equal weight. And there are some things that, like those critical and high risk findings that come in, you do need to act with urgency. So that's not something where you wait around. And I guess maybe the hairnet is an example of something that it's okay. We could get to that a little bit later, but critical issues we need to focus on. And so Tammy, you kind of teased this a little bit, but with the edition 10 coming out soon, I know that there is a little bit of a focus kind of on that risk-based approach. Is there anything you'd like to add either around risk-based or kind of around edition 10?
Yeah, so we have put a little bit more of an emphasis on risk-based within edition 10. And this is, I'm not giving away any secrets because we talked about this during SQF Unites back in March. So we have done that. Again, it is about risk-based, and it kind of goes along with some of the questions that I'm seeing. Again, you guys are putting in some great questions. For example, somebody posted in, what do we think about, the fake nails, the eyelash implants and things like that. So with that question, I would direct them to that risk-based. So is that problem a risk? And so, the SQF code says that for all of your GMP modules or your GDP, your good industry practice modules, you can risk assess out of a requirement or use an alternate control. So you need to look at those fake nails. You need to look at those eyelash implants. So are they a risk? And if they are, without just flat out saying, no, you can't do them, are there other alternate controls that you can put in place that would permit them? So, but that's going to be on an individual by site response. I mean, you're just going to have to do that. So, yeah. So, I mean, again, it is all about risk. And I like that you focused on, do those food safety things first, those critical ones, and including those regulatory. and do it with urgency. You know, there needs to be a little pep in your step to get those things corrected. So, you know, and I would say, you know, here's a great opportunity to delegate too,
Yeah.
those minor issues. Train your staff, train your team in corrective actions. There are a lot of people out there that could lead some great corrective action teams, and they may never get the opportunity. So, you know, assign somebody else how to figure out how to make sure people are wearing their hairnets, you know, so delegate is another opportunity as well. So
Yeah, I like what you said too of it is like on a site by site basis, something that might be a risk at one site might not be a risk somewhere else. So it is if you do have it delegated of, you know, be on the lookout for things that might pose risk. Like there might be some areas where people don't usually have, you know, fake nails and all that stuff, but then maybe there's an area that they do. So if you have people kind of knowing what to look for and you're delegating that out, it is less for you to focus on, and it is kind of like a site by site thing.
absolutely. All right, well, let's go ahead and look at the next slide.
Perfect. So again, before we get, I know that there's a lot of questions, so we'll get into those, but I did just sort of want to highlight, you know, with us being partnered with SQF, we do have kind of opportunities and tools that can help you if you maybe are unsure how to prepare for your audit. You know, so some of the different things that we offer, and my information will be kind of available after this. If you guys have questions, if you know want to see a demo of any of this, we would love to show you. But kind of the beauty of a digital platform is you can take things like your standards and your policies and you can digitize them. It's very common that people have, you know, manuals and they might be outdated. The only copy might live in the basement somewhere. But if you've got digital records of everything that you can reference and everybody knows where to go to kind of look at those policies and procedures, it makes it a lot easier for people to know what that standard is in the first place. We also have audit management. So kind of as you're preparing for your SQF audit, I mentioned kind of before, you know, if you want to do like a monthly temperature check, weekly checklist, daily checklist, even just things to prepare you so that, you know, when your SQF auditor shows up, you know what they're going to ask. You are good to go. You've been asking everybody on staff those same questions for, you know, the months leading up to your inspection. So it's not like a scary thing of, oh, somebody is coming to audit. It's, yeah, we're partnering together. We love that you're holding us accountable. You know, SQF auditor, we know exactly what you're going to ask, and you can even show like, here are some of our results. So you kind of already know maybe what the issues they might uncover are going to be. Same with documents. If you have an area where documents are stored, again, when your auditor shows up, you're like, here, then we even have a way to send them directly to the auditor. But sometimes documents will live in somebody's email, in a SharePoint site, kind of just all over the place. So if you've got a central area to store them, that's great. And then kind of the output of all of those things are corrective actions. So you know what the issues are and you can document them. And then reporting and insights. So you can see over time, you know, how can we celebrate our successes, or how can we focus on some of our opportunities? What are some of our repeat issues? So yeah, if that is anything that interests anybody, if you are looking for kind of a risk management, a compliance solution, we would be happy to chat more around that. And again, my information will be out there. Happy to have a little chat. But that is kind of it on the covered material. So Tammy, I guess we can continue with questions.
Yes, and we have several more to get to. So so someone had made the comment that they've been in previous trainings where they've been directed that corrections do not have to be documented. Has that changed, or is it no longer a best practice? So I don't know if you have a thought on that, Megan, but
I would say, and I don't know if there's an official stance on it, but the more that you document, I would say the better. Again, using that example of if I, you know, do a correction and then I leave, that knowledge is lost with me. But again, at the same time, you want to prioritize what is most important. So I don't know if it's what SQF stand, but I would say the more that you can document without, you know, wasting time, the better. And again, I would say maybe if it's something that is poses a higher risk, you want to document a little bit more than if it's a little bit of a lower risk. Yeah, I guess that would be my thought.
I personally like to see more documentation is better. So if I'm going to take the time to do a correction, then I'm going to take the time to document that. In a lot of cases, if I've opened a formal corrective action on it. So, in saying that, just because I walk by somebody and say, hey, your hairnet's not correct, I don't document that and open a formal corrective action. Necessarily. So, yeah, I mean, best practice I would say would be to document corrections if you are going to take the time to do them and have a formal corrective action process on something. Just to give you a little bit of hint to edition 10, and this is nothing, I'm not letting any secrets out. We talked about corrective action and the changes coming for edition 10 at the SQF conference. We did actually add the word correction into edition 10. So you're going to see that clause is updated. Instead of saying corrective and preventative action, it's now going to say correction, corrective, and preventative action. And so we've added that in there because we felt like that was a missing piece in edition 9. So we have added the word correction just to let you guys know it will be there. But along with that questions, somebody asked, this was the one that was posted at the top of the hour. I hadn't even started, I think, and somebody posted a question. How are SQF certifying bodies looking at CAPAs for edition 10 and what will change? So I'll take that question. So our auditors, our certification bodies shouldn't be looking at corrective action any differently. We haven't changed the intent behind doing root cause analysis, doing the CAPA process. So that's not going to change. So, so the intent there should be the same. But I will say, as I said earlier, we've done calibration training. So I know some of you all are seeing more rejections of your root causes and your corrective actions and things these days. And that's why. You all can blame me completely because we've been training our auditors on accepting good root causes, which lead to good corrective actions. And so just to let you know that. So let me get to the next question. Okay, someone asked, should we write a CAPA with root cause for every rodent that we find in a trap within our facility? What do you think about that, Megan? You want corrective action on, rodents running around? I would say running around, caught in traps. Let's put it that way.
Maybe similar to, I don't know that it necessarily has to be like per rodent. I guess similar to the hand washing example of you can have one corrective action that covers all of it. Cause I think you kind of want to get to the root cause of why there are so many different rodents. If they're in different areas, it's possible that the root cause is different. So maybe it's kind of the same thing of like not a one size fits all. I don't know that I would do it per rodent though, maybe by area, like looking at specifically what is the root cause of these rodents in the specific area. And if they're in different areas, maybe you have different corrective actions. What would you say, Tam?
No, that's a good point. That goes back to your pitfalls when you were talking about the big problems. So, maybe it's dividing it into smaller issues. So you're not attacking a problem that's too big to solve. But I like where you're going with looking at specific areas. Within the SQF code, we talk about trend analysis. So the expectation is that you're trending things. So I wouldn't necessarily do a corrective action on one rodent catch. But if you have a rodent catch more often than that, then there's probably a reason and you need to get to that root cause and do something about it. And somebody has a follow-up pest. So let me get that question before we move on. How can we make the pest company close out a corrective action if they won't? For example, I keep repeating that the issue has been discussed and will be addressed. However, I keep seeing an open action. So, discussing, first of all, the pest company works for you.
Mhm.
So you need to have an understanding of what the expectations are. Now, with that being said, if your pest contractor doesn't think you're doing a corrective action, then I'm with him. I'm not closing it out. So, or if he's seeing repeat issues. So, or if he's getting the same corrective action every time. So if everything he tells you and you say, oh, we talked about it, that's not really corrective action. So I would rewind and go back and, rewatch some of this webinar, because just talking about something isn't really a corrective action. So I would kind of look inward first to see if I can dig a little deeper. And then it, might warrant a conversation with your person. Okay, so this person followed up. We are waiting for the installation of the roll-up doors. Okay, so great. So you have a corrective action. Thank you for following up. So you have a corrective action identified. You just haven't implemented it yet. So here's my thought. What are you doing in the interim to prevent the issue or to control the issue in the absence of your corrective action that you've clearly identified through your root cause process? So I would just, is there something we can do? Something a little bit more than just talking about it, because talking about it's not going to keep the mice out, not going to keep the bugs out. Yeah, so just checking to see, and that might be, time to collaborate with him. I find that pest control companies, they have a lot of great, insight sometimes. And I've, spent time with one of the larger pest control companies. They invited me down to speak a couple years ago at their regional managers meeting, and they've got a lot of great insight onto how to control pests. So get your technician involved. Ask him what he's wanting to see to be able to close that out. So yeah, just communication is important. So let's see, let me go back. Another question. Okay, so for minor incidents like missing a hairnet, if a correction is immediately made, does a formal corrective action with the root cause? Okay, I think we've already answered that. Oh, wait, I got another question that popped up. Okay, so someone's got a comment. It's not really a question, but you mentioned this, Megan, so I'm gonna kind of make everybody aware of what it says. Behavior-related root cause could lead to working towards a more robust or employee buy-in to food safety and quality culture. The consequences of the poor behavior on a personal level may be helpful, as I talked about. Life's all about choices. Choose to work here, follow the rules, or choose to work somewhere else. And culture is not always easy to change and improve. Any tips on culture, Megan? How do we get people to do the right thing, even when nobody's watching?
Yeah, for me, again, even in my personal life, knowing the why behind things is so important. Saying you need to wear a hairnet. I don't want to wear a hairnet. I got my hair done. I want to look cute. Why? Why does it matter? What happens if I get my hair in, food? How can that make people sick? What are other implications? Do you want other people not wearing hairnets? And getting food in your stuff, and getting everybody to understand that, the procedures, the standards that we have in place, it's not because somebody is out there just, writing things for the sake of writing them. We just really want to enforce rules. There's a reason behind it, and it matters. The work that you're doing matters. The work that your employees are doing, it matters, and it matters for more than just the sake of doing it. So I feel like the culture does come from the top down of explaining the why. And then Tammy, you mentioned this. I really do think delegating can play a big part. There are probably people on your team that you might not think, want to own something, but even if you give them something small, like hair nets. Okay, Tammy, you are in charge of hair nets. Make sure that everybody is wearing them. That might seem, small, and maybe it's too small for you to focus on, but other people, if they are owning those different areas, and then they can maybe uncover other things. So yeah, culture, I mean, it does come from the top down, but I think just explaining the why behind things, getting everybody bought in, knowing that they play a part, that's kind of what helps drive that culture. Culture isn't just one person, it's everybody kind of working together for a greater purpose. And you set the tone for that, but everybody needs to buy into it as well.
Yeah, and I like where you're heading with that. You don't want to wear a hairnet. So just to talk about hairnets, a lot of people don't want to wear hairnets. But I mean, I worked in a facility that honestly, I think we solved our hairnet problem. We did. We did a few things. We did a display. We put the hairnets where there was a mirror so people could check themselves before they walked out. But one of the best things we did was we bought larger hair nets. So Meagan, just looking at all your hair, no, you don't want to put your hair up in this little hair net that, hugs your head. So we bought bigger hair nets, and guess what? People started using them because they were much easier to use. They were easier to keep the hair in. And who knew there were like 5 different sizes of hair nets? I had no idea. So, but I didn't until we did a CAPA on it. So, again, we've got a comment in the chat again about, where's that balance between the big issues and the little issues. And again, people will look at hair nets and go, that's a little issue, but it's a little issue that could turn into a big issue. So, unless you do a root cause corrective action on it, it may be difficult to solve your problem. And that person also had a follow-up question. So how many CAPAs do sites typically have over the course of the year? And his site typically has 10 to 15 because they only do them for large issues. So I don't know if there's any way to even begin to guess how many CAPAs that sites do. I know that in edition 9, CAPA was mentioned in like 12 different places. So when I train the new auditors, I tell them that's 12 opportunities to audit CAPA. And it's not always a big CAPA. I mean, it may be something that I wouldn't say the full-blown process was done on. It might not have been put onto a CAPA form, but is there a place on a form where it says, what did you do to fix the problem? Well, that's CAPA. Maybe you didn't do the full-blown process, but I guarantee you're probably doing CAPA more often than that. But I wouldn't even begin to guess how many times sites do a CAPA in a year.
Sure. I don't know that I could either. I will say one thing that can kind of help sometimes is shifting the question, maybe. I think sometimes, so a formal CAPA, if you get, an auditor that comes in and identifies issues, that's not great. But if you are doing like the daily self-checks, the weekly, the monthly checks, it should almost be a goal to try to find issues. I see a lot of times people, they're like, oh, we don't want to have any issues. We're going to have a goal of none. And that's great, but you really want to uncover them before someone else does. So kind of shifting that question more of like, as a team, how can we uncover those issues so that, by the time SQF comes in, it's not an issue anymore. So of course, we don't want issues, but sometimes it can be a good thing to find them and fix them and be better because of it.
Right.
But I don't know that I could give a number. It varies.
Yeah, no, I like where you're heading with that though. So the idea is you should be finding more issues than the external auditor.
Yeah.
That's the idea behind an internal audit by your regular monthly inspections or your regular inspections. Some are monthly, some weekly, daily. So those are the things that are, looking to, find those things before your external auditors, your customers who are coming in and doing it, before your consumers are finding those issues. So yeah, the more you do internally, the better you're gonna be externally. And so, yeah, again, I wouldn't have a guess. So we have just a couple more minutes before, and we do have a couple more questions. Created a CAPA report due to an issue with broken glass. This person says they're going to leave the CAPA open for 30 days after their corrective action. They're going to do an inspection weekly. They're going to do an audit of the area next week. For closing this CAPA, what additional documentation would be recommended or required for SQF? So I'll talk about the required, and then I'll let Meagan weigh in on the recommended, because we've talked quite a bit about documentation. So SQF requires you define your process. So you have to have a procedure for corrective action, which would also include how you're going to close it out. So that's what the auditor is going to look for, that procedure, and to see that you followed it, including any closeout. So for everybody, it may be differently, because you're going to define your process and what makes sense for your facility. Now, I'll let Meagan speak to recommended. So what do we need to make sure we have to show the auditor when they come in?
Yeah, I would say the more information, especially for those high risk and critical items, the more you can have, the better. Not just for, the SQF auditor, but also for other, team members, people that are looking at the system later. Photos can be very helpful, like if you show a before and after. Let's see what else. And that just helps. It also just documents the standard of like, this is what it should look like. Work orders can be great. 30 days from now, if we have somebody coming out, great. Here's our signed work order to show that 30 days from now, we have somebody coming out. That's pretty official. Comments, just any details that you can, again, depending on the type of issue. You might not have a work order, you might not have a formal statement, but photos are something that you can get a lot of the time. So yeah, those are some of the recommendations.
Okay. Our next question, is it realistic to do a full root cause analysis with CAPA for food safety related issues within 48 hours? Now, I'm going to guess that this person probably has a corporate requirement, a customer requirement that says they have to do that. So I'm going to just say that we've already said urgency needs to be a priority. I've been in situations where we've worked a lot of hours in a very short period of time when we were dealing with a critical issue. So it really, well, and I can't speak to the 48 hours. SQF code doesn't define that. But you do have to meet your customer requirements or your corporate requirements. So I don't necessarily like to put a time frame on it because urgent is urgent. And so, I need to get that in. I will say that SQF a few years ago, we used to expect when sites had a recall that they had to fill out that CAPA and turn it back into us within 7 days. And we actually backed that off to 30 days because I want the sites focused on the recall and I want them doing the right things to resolve it. And the paperwork to me can follow later. So that's kind of the perspective we took on it. But yeah, I don't know if you have turnaround times that you think about, Meagan, or thoughts there.
Yeah, it's kind of what you said. Every issue is different. I would say the correction for something critical or high risk should be a pretty quick turnaround. But then sometimes, complex issues sometimes can't be resolved in 48 hours. The correction can take place, but getting down to the root cause and coming up with a plan to fix that, you don't necessarily want to rush. So again, issue by issue will be different. Correction, I think, can happen pretty quickly, but it's not worth rushing. Stuff like that matters. Sometimes you need to, pause and really think about all of the different angles. So you still correct it, and you satisfy, if there is a customer requirement of 48 hours, but you can spend a little bit more time on that root cause and coming up with a preventative action that'll actually last, as opposed to rushing one that maybe won't, or maybe doesn't even address the full root cause.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about risk, so it comes down to risk.
Yeah.
So what is the risk to not having an immediate correction or a corrective action done in 24 hours, 48 hours? What's the risk?
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, that's what food safety is all about. It's not about meeting SQF code requirements. It's not making anybody sick or worse.
Yeah.
So that's where our emphasis should be, is doing the right things and doing them as quickly as possible. So, gosh, you guys, great questions. I think we're not going to get to them all. Let me see if we have time for, so verification of effectiveness. I think this will be our last CAPA question, verification of effectiveness. For CAPA. So their question, they have a follow-up, is this important to the SQF code? Well, verification is important. That's why we require it for all external non-conformances. But I mean, yeah, verification. What do you think, Megan?
Yeah, again, risk-based, it kind of changes, but I mean, you want to verify that it's not an issue again. I would say, like, if you continue to see the same couple of things, you sort of know that you're not resolving it. Yeah, what would you say, Tammy?
Yeah, well, I was gonna say, I like where you're going with that, because reoccurrence
Um,
means you don't really have an effective CAPA process if you keep seeing the same problems or similar problems over and over. So that's why verification is so crucial. And and I've got caught in the past, prior to being in the food industry, where I verified something, quantity in a box. I counted box upon box upon box after we implemented a corrective action. We were going to count parts using a laser, and I verified it. Yes, all the right numbers were going in the box. And then 6 weeks later, my customer calls and says, "You're not putting the right quantity in the box again." And I was so certain I had verified it the day we implemented it. It was good. And when I called the laser supplier, they said, "Oh, sounds like you have laser degradation." What? What is that? Is that even a thing? So verification, extremely important to finish out that corrective action process. Okay, so thank you all again for being with us. We're down just to the last couple minutes. There was one question that I was saying at the very end. Someone said, when a question arises with an SQF requirement, who can you call to discuss it with an SQF? Well, you don't call, because we have 14,000 sites. So I don't want my phone. I wouldn't get anything done if I just answered the phone all day. However, you can email compliance@sqfi.com. And there are 2 people on the compliance team, and we will get to your question. Okay. So if you need a code clarification, you can certainly reach out to us. But hey, your auditor, your CB can also provide code clarification questions. So you have multiple options, okay? But you can reach me at compliance@sqfi.com. Megan has her email address on the screen there. So if you have any questions, are interested in, CMX for your facility outside of the SQF program, feel free to reach out to Megan. I see Koo, he's typing in the chat. Email addresses will be in tomorrow's email. So compliance@sqfi.com. Somebody asked me to say that again, so I did. But thank you, Megan, for being here with me today. I enjoyed it so much. Hopefully I'll see you at the SQF conference in St. Louis. And I invite all of the rest of you, please, there's going to be so much information and content on edition 10. You do not want to miss it. So see us in St. Louis in March. Go to our website to learn more about our SQF conference. So thank you all again, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Thank you, everyone.